9334944.
That's the
Oh, is that one?
Yeah.
Thought the number was familiar. Nasty little note taking.
Oh, Jamie. Oh, wait a minute.
And the way it's working now is it's as we see it on the screen, right?
There we go.
Not from the back corner. Correct.
We are live.
All right.
You can open the meeting.
Perfect. Thank you very much. A Dead Sea Scroll here. Okay. All right. Looking through the Zoom windows, I can see all these boxes up and down. Okay. Good evening and welcome to the November 2nd, 2020. This is 2020 years almost over. God bless. Regular business meeting for Town of Turner Valley, and we are opening the meeting at 6:30. Okay, and we have one small addition to the agenda, and that is an in-camera session at the end. So that will be 18. And what would be the designation that we're going in under? Strategic direction?
Advice from officials, 24-1.
Okay, 24-1. Thank you. Okay, and so there we have an addition. Can I get a motion to adopt that agenda, please? Deputy Mayor Wilkie, and all in favor? Slide off so I can see Rab. Oh, good. I got Cindy and Rab in the same window. Perfect. Thank you. So Cindy and Rab, I now have you in my window, so you guys can just flag me with your hands, and I'll see you. Okay, perfect. So that's adopted. Motion around the close, no closed session at the beginning. Adoption of previous minutes. Organizational minutes from October 19th, 2020. Get a motion for that. Looking at Rab, thank you, Mr. Rab. Any points of clarity on that? That's our org chart. Good. All in favor? Excellent, that's carried. Oh, and for all you at home, we don't have Councillor Gordon with us this evening. He was a little ill, so we wish him the best wishes to get better, and he'll be here next week, I'm sure. So that's carried. 5.2, regular business meetings from October 19th as well. Waring, thank you, Mr. Waring. And any discussion on that? Any points, clarity, clue it up, fix it? Perfect. Excellent. All in favor? And that's it, carried. Question period. At the beginning of every business meeting, the Town of Turner Valley Council has a 15-minute question period in which we leave open for the public to ask questions of administration or council for clarity or overall just inquiry. During COVID, of course, email, phone call, written paper is always best. You can't be in chambers. So, Mr. Sharp, did we receive any questions this evening, or this week, last week, in the last 2 weeks?
None this evening, Mayor Craig.
None this evening? All right. In that case, council's good? Yep. All right, we'll move on from question period. Number 7.1 is statutory hearings. We have none. Or nil, as my old man used to say. Delegations? Nil. Reports. Now, I thought we did have something on the reports, or is that on the next page? Yes. Or are you going to have Something on there? No? Okay. All right. No. They got backpedaled out, did it?
No.
Sorry, I'm not sure what we're talking about.
CAO report?
I don't have anything for the CAO report this evening. Unless I missed something you were expecting.
Yeah, no. Agenda meeting, I thought we had something. Well, that's all good. All right, sounds good. Then 9.1, we are good as well. Administrative responses. We have no item. Administrative inquiries. Let me pull up my agenda. I'm hoping there's something. Nothing on there. All right, we're going to get right to the nitty gritty, eh? 11.1, we're done. Bylaws and policies, we have no items. But we have old business. Okay, here we go. Notice of motion, Councillor, or shall I say, Deputy Mayor Wilkie. Deputy Mayor Wilkie will be in the Deputy Mayor position for the next 6 months. So it'll take a little while to get used to saying Deputy Mayor Wilkie. But, Deputy Mayor Wilkie, you may read your notice of motion, please.
Sure. I don't know that I need to read the whole thing, do I?
It's kind of fun.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with having the whereases on record. So what the idea behind this is simply that our Main Street has a number of, call it, underutilized lots on it, and the idea here being I would love to see a program that could help to incentivize investment on those properties. My perspective on things like this is that we're always better off with the carrot than with the stick when it comes to things like this. That's my typical perspective on this. So I think that some sort of incentive program that provides some sort of monetary incentive to developing now as opposed to letting it sit for another 10 years goes a long way to potentially sparking some interest in developing some of those properties. So the hope is here that we can take that away and have management administration bring back a report just on what kind of options are in front of us. The idea here is that I don't want to necessarily be looking at options that reduce revenue to the town below what we're already getting on vacant properties on those lots, but that might consider holding their tax bill or holding their assessment or some sort of equivalency where it essentially keeps them flat for some period of time after a development, right? And when you think about somebody coming in and putting a $1 million development onto a lot, that additional $1 million worth of assessment can be a significant additional tax bill. If I knew that I could save that for some period of time, it might tilt the argument in favor of actually building something on that lot. So that's the idea here. The motion is that council directs administration to prepare a report to council on potential property tax incentives, which will include staff recommendations on the most appropriate time period that can foster development of vacant or underdeveloped properties on Main Street, and provide comments on possible legal implications, and further that administration present the report to the Finance Committee first on February 8th, 2021 for any comment prior to presentation to Council at February 15th, 2021. Taxes aren't, how we can tax is not, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know that, so I obviously want to see what the mechanisms could be, but I know that there's some examples out there where people have done similar things to this. So I'm excited about trying to move something like this forward, and hopefully can get some support to see a report back in February. Any I don't know if administration had anything to add to the.
No.
Mayor
Crane, we don't. It's for council's debate now, and to put this motion to a vote.
Excellent.
I've got some comments.
Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Hamilton to begin, and then we got Councillor Holiday at all.
Councillor Wilkie, I love this idea. I had always thought that we should punitively maybe increase taxes on undeveloped lots. That kind of was my logic, was that, when if you're going to hold lots ransom, or if you're not going to, you know, if you're going to hinder development, then you should pay a higher tax rate than, you know, other builders that are continuing on with development. But I think that this approach makes way more sense, and will, you know, benefit the town more because it encourages the development of those lots instead of just trying to get, you know, an increased tax revenue from vacant lots. We're actually encouraging, or trying to encourage or incentivize development. So I think this is fantastic, and I support it 100%.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Holiday.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak a little bit about what Councillor Hamilton just said, although I am a little concerned because the people that are ultimately going to develop these lots are not necessarily the people that are holding on to them right now. I do still worry about them holding them for ransom or having exorbitant prices on them that people just that do have interest in buying and developing on them just can't afford. So I don't like totally taking punitive off the table. I wonder what's been used in other municipalities, whether positive has worked better than negative, or whether you can use both. I'm not 100%. I like the idea of trying to be nice, but I'm not 100% against taking the other options off the table. So I guess I just want to throw that out there in case anybody feels the same way.
Okay, next, thank you. Councillor Byrne.
Great idea. It's come up before in the past in previous councils, and I was always led to believe we weren't allowed to do it. So is looking forward to the new information. Thank you.
Point blank. Councillor Rapp, ideas, thoughts? Or I'll go to Wilkie first if you like.
I'm okay. I can go. I like what Lana said. I like the motion, but I really think there has to be some kind of incentive for the people that currently own those lots to like put some pressure on them to consider moving them for a fair price. So I'm not against the punitive part, as Councillor Halliday says.
Yep. Deputy Mayor Wilkie?
Yeah, I hear you guys on trying to light a fire under people. My thinking on this was that a limited time period on that incentive accomplishes the same thing. In my mind, that does light that fire under people to get something done sooner rather than later, because then every year that goes by that you don't do something, you're losing whatever the amount of potential property tax savings is every year. So I think that's a real value. That's of value to the developer here, but obviously open to other ideas on that front as well. I tend to find that it when we look at what we're actually taking from vacant property tax collections, you know, if a person were to double it's not a significant increase, I don't think, considering what they're holding for property, right? So my view is that incentive, if you can get that development, that pays off over the long term if we have to forego some of that development or some of that tax revenue in the near term. So I'm definitely open to the punitive side of things. I would really like to see it on the positive side of things, because I think it also goes with that strategic goal of kind of open for business, right? Trying to work with business to try to make something happen and just show where we'd like to see some progress happen.
Okay, Rob, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'd support the motion as it is, and see what administration comes back to us with, and perhaps we can always go down the road of, you know, of penalties in the future if we see fit. But let's see if this works. Let's give it a try. It's better than what we had right now, anyway.
Deputy. Holiday.
Yeah, Councillor Wilkie made a good point there. If we offer it for a limited time, so it puts the time pressure on it, I think that's a good idea. And yeah, we can reassess in a few years if it's not working. So doing something now is better than the status quo. So I'm happy with the motion.
I like the motion. I'm just wondering, can it be a little broader even to include, building developers? So like subsection developers. I know, Lacombe had a project 15 years ago, that they had land was extremely cheap. And if you sold that house in the first 10 years, then you had to refund back to town the full allotment of the land's value. And there was some different incentives there to increase development and attract more people to the town. And I think we're in a state where we don't have a lot of land left. We do have a few subsections. But if there's a break even there, it's another incentive to come out. So I'd really like us to throw that fish line out the bar and see what we can drag in terms of, let's look at as much as possible when it comes to incentivizing not just the vacant lots, but maybe attracting some builders as well, something of that nature. But I think administration is going to start down a path if this motion passes, and we might just end up dredging some of that information as a part of the wash, maybe. So, but as far as incentivizing development, it's a no-brainer for me. It's an automatic yes. I do like the teeth bit as well, so I wouldn't mind seeing something that has a bit of a hindrance or whatnot into just leaving it naked and ugly again. I mean, in the last 3 years, to me, it's been beautified by removing all the dead weight buildings. So we're already making progress. So maybe this is the next natural step, is to give that incentive now, and that gets it over the finish line. That would be my hope. But I guess we'll see. I'm going to be a yes. I support this motion. So if there's any further debate, Cindy, you dropped out of my window. You're over there now. Oh, there you are. Okay. So if you guys are good at home, we're good here in the room. We can just call a vote. And I'll ask Mr. Wilkie to make the recommendation on which of the options you prefer.
Option one is as presented in the RFP.
All right, you want to read it out for those at home?
I already read it once.
Perfect. Okay, yeah, I already read it once.
I can read it again.
Okay.
No.
They're always nice. Do the whereas statement. Come on. All right, excellent. In that case, no further debate. I'm not seeing any across the room here. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Excellent. All right. Next item up for business. 13.2, Public Participation Plan Phase 1, turning on the budget final results. Mr. Sharp, I shall hand it over to you.
Thanks, Mayor Crane. I could pass this off to Ms. Middleton, but I think what you see in front of you is a really good summary of what we heard from the public. The details are in the report. And I turn it back over to you, Mayor Crane and Council, if you have any questions of administration on the survey report that we presented.
All right, excellent. Okay, Council, back in our court. So, 138 responses, 11.8% of the population. Thoughts, comments? Deputy Mayor Wilkie, you may begin.
Yeah, the one question I had was, there was kind of a summary of commentary, I think, included. I was wondering if it's possible to get kind of the detailed comments behind it, just a full listing of any comments that were provided.
Sure, there's no concerns. To be quite honest, there were a number of comments in there that weren't worth sharing. Quite defamatory. A few were, to be quite honest, not appropriate. So we chose not to publish every comment in the report, but I'm happy to send that list to council.
Yeah, no, thank you for not putting it public if it was of demeaning nature. But yeah, for council's clarification, sure, we can take an email with those attached. Councillor Holiday, that's good for you? You're good. Rab, you're good?
I've got comments.
Councillor Hamilton has comments. Go ahead.
So I just want to make sure that we keep this, like we've gone through the process. We've got, 11% of our residents, I guess, responding. We need to really keep this feedback in mind when we look to budget 2021. I don't think that we needed to ask people if they were okay with the tax increase. Most aren't, but that's evident in our survey. But what's also evident is that there is a willingness to decrease service levels to keep taxes lower, and I think that's something that we really need to keep in mind as we look to the budget. Times are tough. There's definitely a large amount of our population that has been affected by the pandemic, and maybe that is job loss, maybe that means they're financially strapped, but I think that we need to really take this information and keep it in mind when we look at our budget. So just wanted to note that there is a theme here to most residents not approving of a tax increase, and also most residents willing to decrease service levels in order to achieve that non-increase into their taxes. So thanks to administration for the presentation and the way that it was reported. Looks good to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moran, you're good. Councillor Rabb, Councillor Holiday, go ahead.
Yeah, I forgot to ask earlier. I don't know if this is being shared at our town hall tomorrow, but there was one slide that had the really cool bar chart on the question 8. That's the labeling on it's not complete. We only have you can only see 1, 2, and 3. You can't see what all the other colors are. And it's actually a really informative graphic, but it just needs that labeling fixed. And maybe if we're going to reuse this and put it somewhere, like you can figure it out from the numbers underneath, but if we're reusing it, that should be tidied up. But I really like that graphic.
All right. All right. Councillor Rabb, and then Deputy Mayor Wilkie. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I really like this. I think it's an excellent summary of what people feel. I'm also really looking forward to the next 2 days to hear some more, because we do have to pay attention to this when we do our deliberations on taxes. So the next 2 days are going to be fun too, to hear what people have to say.
Deputy Mayor Wilkie.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Councillor Hamilton pointed out the willingness on the service level decrease side of things was interesting. I also found it interesting that sort of perfectly balanced willingness to assume debt versus not assume debt as well. It was interesting to see some of that feedback. The one thing I did want to mention is, I just wanted to thank everybody that participated in this. The challenge that I see coming out of this is that I think there may be another level of granularity that's required, and I don't know if that requires kind of a follow-on survey that asks some more very specific questions following, town hall and deliberation that kind of hones in on sort of very specific, proposals or opportunities. So I do think, some of the priorities that we saw had a lot of services potentially lumped into them. So then as we think about what might be lower priority for folks, I think the question becomes what within those buckets is lower priority. There's a lot of things included in some of them. So just want to keep that in mind as we go forward.
Yeah, I think, it's a very pointed question is what's nice about it. There's very little room for gray. So I like the fact that we can deduce some clear information from those simple 70 questions. So tomorrow and the next day, obviously, we're going to be doing our public participation. So I look forward to that. I do thank administration as well for putting this together and getting it out. Would have been nice to see a lot more, say another 200 would have been good. People do the 3-minute and 45-minute survey, 45-second survey. That would have been great, but hey, people are busy right now, I get it. So it is what it is. But for us, it gives us some great information, so thank you for that. If there's no further comment on it, we're going to adopt it for information, and we're going to move on. Okay, no further comment. Councillor Wilkie?
Nope, not a comment.
Nope.
No, that was just scratch my.
That was a motion.
Oh, okay, motion, yeah.
You moved, you were the first one.
Call it a motion, yeah.
Adopted for information. Any further comment? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Middleton. 13.3, Utility Rate Bylaw Rate Review, 19-1098. All right, this one we have some questions on, for sure. Mr. Sharp.
Sure. Thanks, Mayor Crane. So as you know, 2 weeks ago at Council, administration brought forward some analysis regarding additional work that needs to be done on the utility rates. The bylaw dictates that we must update the rate each year, and administration brought forward the information regarding bringing additional operating costs over into the rate. Council had asked for more clarity on what those costs were and a breakdown of how the formulas were working and how we arrived at the numbers we did. And so I'll turn it over to Ms. Middleton to share her screen and take you through the presentation for the evening.
Excellent, thank you. She shares her screen, Councillor Hallday and Councillor Rabb. It'll be a little hard to see you in my little screen, so maybe cough and we'll hear you on the microphone, or just say, comment please. But if we can, let's let Ms. Middleton finish her presentation. We'll save all our questions for the end, and we'll go through it from there. All right, Ms. Middleton, all yours.
Sorry about that. I was having some challenges unmuting myself. So good evening, Council. I'm going to take you through some of the presentation has some slides from the previous presentation, so I may elect to just go through those a little bit quicker, and I'll cut kind of down to the key information that was asked of administration following the meeting on October the 19th. So I'll take you through the presentation. And my screen is stuck.
Good old Okotoks fiber optics, eh?
I'm just going to open it in PowerPoint. It'll be, I think, easier to deal with.
Yep, have at her.
Okay. All right, here we go. We're back at it. Okay, so just to go through some of the background from the previous meeting, under the terms of the bylaw each year, the rates of the town of Turner Valley, the formulas for calculation of rates outlined in Schedule I, we go through and we determine what kind of changes are required. So we're going through this process. This is the first year that we're going through this with the new bylaw. As stated, a motion was put forward by Councillor Wilkie to postpone the review and the process of the RFD from the previous meeting to have further discussion and some additional information on some costs that are included and in the model and how we derived the new rates. So we're going to go through those. This is just some background on the current rates, which we discussed at the last meeting, and the consumptive rates and how they're derived. So keeping in mind, there were some questions perhaps around how the rates are derived. So we are using the 2019 as our basis in order to establish the 2021 rates. So there's a bit of a lag, and this is consistent with what's in the bylaw.
Hey, Corinne.
Yes?
It's Todd here. I think you're not sharing the current presentation. I think you're still sharing the old one. You'll have to unshare it and then share
no, this is the presentation.
Oh, we're not seeing any change on our screen.
We're still looking at a PDF.
Okay, just a sec. Okay, so we're on slide 6 now. Can everyone see slide 6? It's a breakdown of costs.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is essentially how we derived the new rates. So as you can see, we took the 2019 actual costs, which is includes full cost recovery within the model. So the total expenses were $584,000. And then what we did is we have some potential one-time costs. And the reason why we remove these from the model is that in years going forward, what will happen is we'll have some smoothing out effect with the stabilization fund that we've created. So these one-time costs may not happen next year and may not happen the year after. So we determined that they were kind of incremental. So we've removed them from the calculation. So this is how the costs are, the rate is derived on the water side. So the total of those is $494,000. And then we took the consumptive volume that was billed to residents in 2019, and that's the 169,177 of cubes. On the sewer side, the proposed new rates, the total expenses for 2019 were $526,678. And as you can see, the big cost obviously is our purchases from other agencies, and that's the cost that we pay to West End. So in this particular year, there's no real outliers or incremental costs. So we took the entire all of the costs, and that's the 526, and we divided it by the volume, which is the water consumptive volume, and that's per the bylaw, and it's 169,177 to get at a cost rate of $3.11 per cube. So then when we determine the full cost recovery for 2021 rate adjustment, the water meter rates, of course, we've discussed, increase quite substantially, as well the wastewater rates increase as well. So the overall impact for the average resident that uses about 20 cubes of water bi-monthly is an increase of $30 bi-monthly. Now, option 2 that we presented, that particular option is a staggered or kind of a stepped approach. And we used 7 years as our model, and we assumed about a 3% 2021, and then it kind of goes up from there, and then back down in year 7 to 5%. So by the time the 7 years is up, we have factored in all of the costs into the water rates. And that's the same for the wastewater rates as well. So it becomes a model that's a bit of a staggered stepped approach as well. Starting off in year 1 with 3%, and then it has a bit of a declining percentage to 1% by year 7. So what does that look like from a financial impact perspective? So what we did is we took the consolidated numbers and we put them into option 1 and option 2, and we divided up the revenues for sales of the water, sewer, and storm based on the fixed, the consumptive, the stabilization fee. So those are the 3 components that make up the water revenue. And with option 1, if we inserted it into the 2021 budget, the overall revenue impact is $1.5 million. And if we used option 2, the overall revenue impact is about 1.3. So you can see there's a substantial difference depending on which option you select. And then when you look at the costs down below, they're the same regardless of whether you choose option 1 or option 2, but the overall cost for the management of the different water distribution, the storm, and the sewer is just over $1.135 million. So depending on the option, if you choose option 1, you have a surplus of 407. And option 2, you have a surplus of 191, keeping in mind some of that goes into reserves depending on which option you select. So when we break that water consolidated down by different components, we have stormwater. So currently stormwater, we have fixed fees of $70,000, just under $71,000. And what that represents is the fixed fee of $10.05 bi-monthly. And we took that model and we based it on 1,176 households. So we see we have an overall surplus of 50,509, and that's consistent with both options, keeping in mind that in this particular exercise, we're only looking at the consumptive fees. So when we go to water distribution, we have both the fixed and the consumptive and the stabilization fees. So the fixed and the stabilization fee, they'll stay the same regardless of what option you choose because they're based on the fixed fee is $25.67 bi-monthly, and the fixed fee on the stabilization side is 10 cents per cube of water. So it's based on a model of about 165,000 cubes per year. So then what we did was we put in the various consumptive breakdowns depending on what tier the residents were in. So right now, approximately 75% of all of the water is sitting in tier 1. And then it broke down correspondingly to tier 2 and then tier 3, keeping in and utilizing the rates, the new rates stated. So we have that for option 1, which gives us an overall consumptive revenue of just under 489,000 under option 1. If we use option 2, which states that we have a consumptive breakdown the same, but we use the staggered or the smaller percentages approach to the rate changes, we have an overall consumptive revenue of just over 338,000. Keeping in mind that your costs remain the same regardless of what model. So the net surplus under option 1 for water distribution would be just over 156,000. and the net surplus under option 2 would be just under 6,000. So there's a variance there of just over 150,000. So the third component is our wastewater. So under wastewater, as you can see, the fixed fees are $33.79 bi-monthly, and that's based on 1,176 households. So we get a revenue amount of $238,422, and that's consistent with option 1 and option 2. And then on the sales consumptive side, utilizing the options, we keep the tiered approach the same. And so we have just under 526,000 in consumptive revenue under option 1. And option 2, we have just over 460,000. So the variance between those two options is just under 66,000. So keeping in mind then your net surplus, option 1 is just over 200,000 and option 2 is just under 135,000. So those are how the three different components which make up the water consolidation, that's how the different options will impact your overall surplus or under option 1 and 2. So just to summarize, under the full cost recovery, the utility rates would increase about $180 a household under the option 1. Other key information that would impact option 1 is it eliminates a significant tax increase to manage utility deficit. Tax savings that would not be passed on would amount to about $184 a household. Full cost recovery allows administration to put funds in reserves, and administration would continue to review and look at the utility rates on an annual basis. Under option 2, which is a full cost recovery phased in over 7 years, the phased-in consumptive metered rate changes for water and wastewater will have a minimal impact to residents. So overall, it's about 3% on each component per year. Phased-in approach would permit utility cost certainty for residents, so they would have a very clear idea of what their costs would be and what their rates would be over the next 7 years. It still permits long-term planning for administration, so we would still be able to look at the rates on an annual basis, but we would just make some changes based on any kind of inflationary pressures or some large increases that we would have to look at, and we would go back and amend the rates. But we would still continue to review them on an annual basis. So going back to the calculations, I guess I will field questions if there are any questions that you'd like clarity around the information that we've provided.
Yeah, I think we've got a view here. Slide over. I'm going to start with Councillor Hamilton. And then I've got Deputy Mayor Wilkie.
Okay, so I've got a couple questions. Thanks, Corinne, for your presentation. When you talk about the consumption breakdown and the percentages, are you saying that 75% of our residents are on tier 1, using under 23 cubes of water per billing cycle?
Yeah, so it overall kind of averages anywhere between like 68 to 75. So for the most part, residents are using anywhere between 18 to 20 cubes. So there is, I would, based on looking back and going through all of the numbers for 2020, residents are conserving water.
Okay. So my next question then is, the utility rate increase that you mentioned under option 1, the full cost recovery, is $180 per household, but that's based on the 20 meters cubed. So I'm wondering if we can get that information on, like, that amount based on all of our users, not just based on the 20 meters cubed. If we could get an administration to bring that back, because, like, if I just did some quick math based on 40 meters or 40 cubes, so if someone who's using 20 cubes a month or 40 cubes every 2 months, their bill would increase by $60, and someone who's using 60 plus, their bill would increase by $90. So these are like substantial increases after we already had a pretty substantial increase to our utility rates in January. So I'd like administration, if we could, to get it brought back based on what we're actually seeing, because we're talking about this being an in and out, like X amount of dollars is going to come out of the operating budget and we're going to instead charge it on the utility side, but we're going to be charging more based on the information that you've provided. It's not going to be, we're going to be charging more than what we actually need, because what we actually need is based on 20 cubes. So anybody who's using more than 20 cubes, that's going to be over and above. So while I can agree with total cost recovery, I also don't want us to be increasing fees to our residents in a time when we're in the middle of a pandemic, job loss is at an all-time high. We're talking about increases everywhere, and now we're going to be making money on our utilities. That's the way it looks to me. So maybe we can get that brought back.
So can I just...
Yep, go ahead.
Just through the mayor, can I just clarify that this is bi-monthly, the $30? It's not monthly.
Right, but it's bi-monthly it would be $30 based on 20 cubes. If you used 40 cubes, it would be $60 bi-monthly. If you used 60 plus cubes, it would be $90 plus. So what I'm saying is that the town then is going to be making money on any user that is over and above 20 cubes, the way that this is laid out.
Okay, so through the mayor, if I may go back to the slide. So what we did was, if 75%, if you go back to this slide here, use 20 cubes, that's 75% of the total 165, which is the total of all consumption. Then in the next tier, you'll have 20% that will be in the higher tier, and then 5% are in maybe the next tier. So it's a progressive. So the first 23 cubes, you will pay a certain amount, and then 23 to 46, you pay a certain amount, and then over 46. So when you look at how the model is derived, tier 1 is 0 to 23. So most of the residents are in that 0 to 23, and they're using on average anywhere between 18 to 22 cubes. And then in tier 2, you'll have volumes in tier 2, which is only 20% of the 165,000 cubes. And then you have maybe 5% that are in the next tier.
Right, but the way that it's been presented by administration is that the user is going to see an increase of $30 on their bill.
Yeah.
That is only if they use under 20 cubes. If they use 40 cubes, for an example, their current bill would be $316. Their new bill would be $376, which is a difference of $60, not 30.
Well, I mean, the thing is you have to, through the mayor, you have to establish an average. So if the majority of your residents are in average 20 cubes, and this is the same way that the model was calculated for when the bylaw was originally set up. It's using the same methodology.
Okay, well, maybe I can show you what I mean, Corinne, because I don't think that I'm explaining myself well. So I might have to show you what I'm seeing. But basically what it equates to is just another substantial increase in fees to our user. My other question is, have we looked into what our neighbors are doing? We're talking about amalgamation. We're going down this path. My understanding is Black Diamond is a fixed rate. Their bills, I got a friend from Black Diamond to send me a bill, shows a combined fee of $4.70 per cube for consumption. Our proposed for the same amount, 23 cubes and up, is $6.03. So that's $1.33 difference to the Turner Valley resident from a Black Diamond resident. I'm not okay with that. So I'd like also for administration to look into why there's such a substantial difference between the two towns. And I think that's my last question.
Okay. We'll let Wilkie have a go, but if indeed Black Diamond is at a 470, you're saying our proposed is 603?
Yeah.
For the same bracket, that I would definitely want to see an answer on that one for sure. Deputy Mayor Wilkie, you want to have a?
Yeah,
and let me just see if Cindy's.
so I've got, I guess, a chain of questions here. I am less overall concerned with the rate going up, so long as on a dollar for dollar basis, residents are seeing a break on their taxes. And that's, in my mind, what has to be the flip side of this, because what we're seeing here is there's not incremental cost recognized from one year to the other in this proposal, right? So any of the amounts that we're funding now are coming out of taxes. So any change to the rate, in my mind, should result in an offsetting reduction to taxes, and that should be our base when we start doing our operating budget. When I run the math, and Corinne, if you can help me understand this, when I look at the page titled Financial Impact Option 1 and 2 2021 Budget Consolidated, when I take Budget 2021 Option 1 of 1.542 million minus the actual 2020, the difference that I get between those two is $363,000, right? So $363,000 increase in revenue on a year-over-year basis. And then I divide that by 1,176 households, and I get a number of $309 a year. So if it's less houses, then that would be an even larger increase, right? So I'm just doing round math here, right? So I don't understand where the $180 comes from. That said, if the number is $309, I can still wrap my head around $309 if it's a $309 reduction to the average tax bill. I'm okay with that, because the idea is that we're charging people for what they use as opposed to taxes, which charges people for just having a property. So I guess two things that I'd like confirmation on. How do we get the $180 a year when given that revenue number that I mentioned? And number two, would just like confirmation that any increase in revenue on the utility side of things is intended to be offset on the property tax bill as we look at this budget. I recognize that we have a deficit that we have to deal with, but in my mind, that has to be a separate exercise. I just want to be 100% clear that we're not using utility rates to plug a deficit here.
Okay, so to answer your question through the mayor, so one of the things you need to consider in the budget, in the option numbers, is we derived the rate based on using 2019 information. So that means your actual consumption number is based on 2019 volumes, but our volumes have been declining. So, for example, in our 2020 actuals, the volume is actually about 165,000. But because of the way the model is set up, we have to use 2019 actual cost, 2019 volume. But in the budget, you have to base it on a number that's realistic, which is about 165,000 cubes is what we will likely bill out for 2020. So you're going to see a variance there because we are not using 169 in the 2021 budget to calculate the consumptive revenue. We're using the rate, but that's not the volume.
Can I just clarify that? Regardless of that, I understand that piece of the equation, but when I look at the difference between the budget revenue and like the revenue is just, that's the fees that we're collecting from people, right?
Yep.
The difference between the two of them, between budget 2021 and actual 2020, is that $364,000, right? And 364,000 divided by 1176 is $309 a household. So I'm trying to understand where the break in my math is here. Now, like, I recognize that there's some businesses in there as well, and then I recognize that not all of the houses are on water and sewer, so it's not quite that simple, but $310 is a long cry from $180.
So to answer your question, so you're correct. The model is, there is some other things in there. For example, the town is a huge water user. So the town of Turner Valley and our facilities were a big water user. So that's also included in the numbers. So the only thing that we can really look at, and we know for sure, is basically we have around 1,176 residents, and that kind of goes back and forth depending on when you have moves and people coming in, people going out. And so there is some variables and some variances around that. So, but what we did when we did the model and what we look at is we look at largely just the residential numbers, and we pull those out when we built the model.
And then my last question was just looking for confirmation that, you know, the difference between those numbers is $365,000 worth of fee increases that the next iteration of budget that we would see, should we approve this, would have $363,000 less income tax collection in it then. Property tax. Sorry, not income tax, property tax.
Yeah.
I get my tax mixed up. There's so many of them.
Okay, I'm gonna go,
I think she said that response. Oh,
you wanna go? I got Councillor Holiday, Councillor Hamilton.
So just to acknowledge Deputy Mayor Wilkie's comment, the rationale is, your rationale is correct, and that's what we're basing it on. If we're moving expenses out of the operating budget over to the utility, there should be a corresponding counterbalance there on the tax bill. Regardless of what the precise number is, that's where it would be.
Regardless, we still have hold of them.
Correct.
The second thing I just wanted to acknowledge is that it's purely coincidence that that amount that we're moving out of the operating expenses somewhere in the neighborhood of the projected deficit we might run in 2021. But we acknowledge that whether that forces a zero out on the deficit or not, that there's likely an intent that council is still going to want us to find some combination of $300,000 on the operating side to prevent a double hit on, I guess, to prevent just moving things over to the utility and having it being disguised as a tax increase. So,
Councillor Holiday.
Yeah, so I just want to confirm, because it says here that tax savings that would not be passed on would amount to $184 per household on that last key highlights page, or third last page. Because that's where I really got confused, because I had thought that if we increased utility rates, taxes would go down correspondingly. So that needs to be a bit more clear. I am just wondering also, because we're buying water and sewer from outside organizations, and I thought we were contracting out all of our repairs to our distribution system to the MD, why we still have $112,000 in wages and benefits. That's a substantial FTE load when we're buying the service externally and contracting out repairs.
Okay.
So to address your question through the mayor, so we still have our utility clerk, some of her wages still go there as well. We are still working with trying to get some in-house expertise as well to assist with on the water distribution side.
So we're not contracting out?
We are not 100% reliant on the county. So there are tasks that are done within the town that can look after some of the distribution side of our system.
The other thing I'll add, Mayor Crane, is that those numbers that you're seeing for budget 2021 are based on 2019 actuals. So we haven't completely moved those expenses out of there. And so you should see that number become more refined in the 2022 utility rate. We're self-performing some of the work, and the remainder would be the utility clerk's wage. And then, of course, down below the contracted services would be the county's amount.
Follow up, Councillor Holiday, before I go to Hamilton? And then I got you, Gary, as well.
Yeah, I didn't quite get, like, the actual 2020 for wages and benefits is 77,000 and going up to 2021, 112. So I'm not, yeah, I guess is that's the corresponding offset, I guess, in the contracted services from 178 to 139. It's just a trade-off there. Is that what you're saying? I just want to be clear.
Yeah, you are correct.
Okay. I'm just going to throw in one thing before I go to Hamilton. So like we did before, and it's just a general question, Todd or Corinne, whoever, or anyone on truck. Prior to us handing over to MD, any town employee who worked for truck operations on any capacity billed back to truck that cost, and then we saw it. Would that not be the same case if we're looking at, as Councillor Holiday said, $100,000 incurred debt due to distribution, which clearly we've said is truck?
No, distribution is ours.
Okay, so I'm just being confused then.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's nothing to bill back to truck. Okay, I just want to make that clear then. Okay, Councillor Hamilton, then Councillor Rapp.
Can you, Corinne, help me explain the stabilization fee? We see that as 2 line items on our utility bill. I'm just wondering what the purpose of that stabilization fee is. What do we do with it?
So just to address your question through the mayor, so that stabilization fee is essentially to smooth out on those years when, if we have like in 2019 or 2018, we had some water main breaks. And so we had some excessive costs that we did not budget for. So that stabilization fee is meant to be utilized when you have situations like that, where we have those incremental costs that just happen because something breaks, whether it's cold or whether it's warm. And those fees, we can utilize that reserve rather than increase rates.
Okay, but isn't that the whole reason why we're doing the increase and why we want $407,000 to go into reserves? Is that not for those same fees? Like, are we not now capturing this twice? Like, if we're looking at putting $33,000 a year into a stabilization fee, for when something breaks. We're also planning on putting $407,000 a year into a stabilization fund, or to keep in. I think we're kind of double billing here with the stabilization fee and this amount that we're trying to put into reserves.
So just to address your question, so there's essentially three components to our utility rate bylaw. So there's the fixed, which is meant to be utilized to replace infrastructure. So that is meant to capture any large infrastructure, not operating. The consumptive revenue is really about paying for your operations. So that's meant to cover off the operations of the utility. And then the stabilization fee is essentially those one-off instances that you can, you have some funds available should you have something that's gone wrong that would be out of your operating budget, not your capital.
Right, but when we did our utility rate review in January, the bylaw that we passed was going to put $200,000 into reserves. Now we're seeing this rate review with $407,000 going into reserves. Is that in addition to the 200, or that include? Okay, so that includes the 200. Mm-hmm. Then we're also putting $33,000 into reserves. Like, I think that's a little bit much, isn't it? 407,000 plus this 33,000 that shows up on as two line items. I'd like us to look into that as well. What is the utility rate review? I think that there was a dollar amount that we should be putting into reserves. I'd like to know what that number is. I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't $440,000. So if we could get that information brought back as well.
So it was 100 each.
I think it was 275, but I can't remember.
Okay, so Mr. Sharp, then we're going to go Rab Holiday.
Sure. So to answer Councillor Hamilton's question, I don't have it in front of me, but give or take, the amount that we were planning or scheduling to put into reserves to properly recapture over time, our infrastructure was about $450,000. And that number was reduced when we came back and said we made a calculation error last year. The tax stabilization is meant to take it out of the rate. So if we have the one-offs where we have a year that we get a cash call from, Shruk, for example, or we have an unusual number of water line breaks, so that we're not constantly going back and tinkering with the rate. That's a reserve that we can draw to cover those costs and top things up. If at some point we're not using those reserves, or it starts to accumulate over time, then that amount would just be transferred to the long-term recapitalization, the reserve fund for the utility. So that's the difference between the two. And that amount equates to 10%, I believe, of the fixed fees, and that was always part of the formula last year to smooth out the rate and to take the blips out from year to year. For example, we're using 1-year-old actuals for our utility. That was the way we chose to do it, rather than try to look into a crystal ball and see what we might be doing in the future. But the time from the end of 2019 until something that might happen in 2021, there's a period of time there that we might not have anticipated, or some of the things around the requisitions that are out of our control. And so that's the purpose of the tax stabilization account. It's it's to stabilize the operating side of things in case there's blips.
All right. So you've got a question, and we'll come back. Councillor Rab, then Councillor Holiday.
Yeah, I can't see anybody because we still have this on the screen, the financial impact. So in any event,
we appear.
Oh, that could clear it, could it? I can't get it clear.
Do you want me to take the screen down?
Please.
Okay.
Anyway, either way, if I go to page 2 of my document that I have, it shows if you take 23 meters cubed, the current consumptive rates is $4.50. That's what we charge our residents, correct? And the actual cost recovery would be $5.94. So even if we raise this 3%, we take the phase-in model, we still are short of money. It's not like we're overcharging anybody. There's still, I mean, if we get to phase in, nobody wants to raise taxes. We all know that. Nobody wants to raise utility rates. We understand that as well. But at the end of the day, it costs money to operate the sewer and water system. And from what I see, correct me if I'm wrong, but our consumptive rates are $4.50 and our actual costs are $5.94. Now, we can't forget there's fixed costs in here as well. And if you look at $4.50, that's pretty much what Councillor Hamilton says that they pay next door. However, don't forget, we also have a stormwater charge, and that's about 15% or thereabouts extra. So I'm not sure if it's apples to apples. So I think that's a good idea to compare. But even if we go this phased in program, it does see a 3% increase, but we're still left short. And where does that money come from? It comes from operating taxes. So either way, it's the same pool of money. If you don't collect it through utilities, then you got to bring it out through your operating budget if you end up short. Is that not correct?
Correct.
So I'm actually in favor of moving on there. I wouldn't mind a little bit more information to be helpful, but at the end of the day, I'm for that phased in model because I don't want to spend. And I'm not necessarily saying we should do it all at one time. Obviously, to raise the taxes that much would be killing. 50% would be criminal, I think, but at this point in time. But we can't just sit on it. We can't be left that much short. That's a huge difference.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rupp. I got Councillor Holiday, then Councillor Waring. Or was it Councillor Wilkie?
Oh, you're waving.
I thought he pointed at you, as in at you.
I've been waving. You're looking at him. You don't see me waving.
Okay, so I got Councillor Holiday, Councillor Waring, Councillor Wilkie in line. Councillor Holiday.
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, the whole point of this exercise is to prevent us from having future Sunset Boulevard situations, right? Where we have a major project and nothing in reserves. Obviously, water is the number one, water and sewer are the number one thing that we provide to our residents. We have to make sure that's covered and taken care of well. So I think we need to charge what it costs. And if residents can't afford other things, we need to cut the luxuries, not the water, because eventually we have to pay for things to get replaced. And that's just the reality of it. So to be putting money away in reserves is something that we haven't been doing as well as we should have been lately. And I think this is a great exercise to realize what things actually cost. And we need to look at other areas of our budget because water and sewer are the number one things. So obviously we have MSI, I guess that factors into it, but then we also have the replacement of our water treatment plant and other cost future things. So those probably balance out as far as paying for large projects in the future. So yeah, I think we need to talk about this more, but I think that this report did a good job of laying things out.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Holiday. Councillor Waring.
Sure, I am sure. Yeah, I appreciate the work that's gone into this, and I appreciate the explanation with respect to fixed and the stabilisation and what's going to go into reserves, etc. My biggest worry over this weekend, and I've been working through the numbers, is that we're working with the right numbers and that we can clearly demonstrate that cost is a cost and where the money's going to and why it has to go there. Whether or not we want to get this thing through tonight or whether we want another kick at the stick, I'm quite happy to have another kick at the stick, to be honest. A lot of things have been raised, especially by Councillor Hamilton with regards to concerns on variation of use and how that will impact the final numbers. But I'm feeling a lot happier at the moment about this than I did when I read it on Friday.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkie, Deputy Mayor Wilkie.
Yeah, since we're, I would like to see this again. A couple of outstanding questions that I have as well, but yeah, like I said, the taxes or utility rates, I'd rather see it come out of utility rates. And my perspective is I'd actually rather do it in one shot, right? Like, just get it done. To me, if we phase this in, it's just too tempting down the road for somebody to say, we'll just skip it this year, right? And then we're still got this bungled situation where we've got some in utility rates, some in operating. So my perspective is I'd like to get it all done in one. I'd like it to be done right. The one other item that I would really like to see is just some detail around the commercial rate, in particular competitiveness of those commercial rates with other communities at the new levels. Just given our priority for open for business, that's one area that I'm exceptionally sensitive to, and I know that some businesses can be very heavy users of water. So for the average resident, 180 out of 180 plus 180 on utilities minus 180 on taxes is fine, but for a business that could be a dramatically different seesaw balance. So I'd really like some more information around that. But yeah, thank you for this detail, and I look forward to some more information.
Excellent, thank you. And Councillor Hamilton has one more thing, and then I just have one little point, and then we'll clue it off, I think.
Thanks. So if I'm looking at the financial impact option 1 and option 2 spreadsheet again, and we've got an increase, actual 2020 to budget 2021, we've got an increase in $20,000 in expenses. But we're looking for an additional, $363,000 in revenue. Can someone help me understand that? Like, expenses have increased by $20,000, but we're looking for $363,000.
So if I can answer your question through the mayor, the model is based on 2019 information. There's nothing to do with 2020 other than we're looking at 2020 volume, actual volumes. Otherwise, the model is strictly based on 2019 volumes and 2019 costs. It has nothing to do with any 2020 information.
But it says actual 2020.
That is just to give you a flavor for what the amounts are today and what our 2020 numbers are going to be. But the model is based on 2019 information.
Okay. So can we have that amended then, that chart amended to have a 2019, a 2020 actual, and...
So through the mayor, the idea with giving you 2020 is it shows the new model. So it shows if I give you you have 2019 revenue, but it doesn't reflect the model that we're currently using. It's based on the old bylaw. So it probably wouldn't be relevant to the information that you see for 2021.
Clear as mud.
No, not.
The model, how the model is built is it takes actual costs for 2019 and actual volumes for 2019. And the new formula started January of 2020. So the reason why I have 2020 in there is it gives you perspective of what our how the model is looking in 2020. But those costs aren't going to be picked up, and it's not in the rates as we're putting forward today.
Okay, so then if I go to your staff report, page 1 and 2 of your staff report show expenses for water distribution and show expenses for sewer. And those are 2019 actuals. So if I combine those and look at those expenses versus the budget 2021 option, there's a difference of like $30,000. So I'm wondering, the same question, except I'm using different numbers now. I'm ignoring the actual 2020 and looking at your actual 2019. If we've got a difference of 30,000 plus or minus,
yep,
in expenses, why are we looking for an additional 360 on the revenue side when we should have already got 200,000 built in from the adjustment that we made to our fixed rate when we did the original utility bylaw review in January? I don't even know if I'm making sense anymore.
Yep.
So,
Just to make 200, why haven't we?
We set the number to make 200
yeah,
so we can go into reserves. We've got an increase in expenses of approximately $30,000, which looks like it's mostly attributed to wages and benefits. And then, yeah.
so through the mayor, so the idea with the reserve is it's supposed to be funding the utility, which isn't 200,000. It's actually over 400,000. So how we've done the calculation for the rates for 2021, pick up 100% of the cost of the utility and operating, as well as it picks up the infrastructure replacement costs, the full recovery of that, which it did not in 2020. So if you go back,
A couple more days to go to get my head around this. I cannot quite understand.
We'll slide to Councillor Holiday. And I think we'll end up anyway at this point. I think we're going to defer this and then we'll do some emailing, get some clarity around some of these items so we can come back really precise. Yeah, could do that, could do a workout. Councillor Holiday, why don't you have a go at it?
Yeah, I just want to say that I finally just understand now what Councillor Hamilton is saying. What happened to our $200,000 that we were supposed to put away in 2020? Because it's not showing when you look at the budget. That's what we're trying to get at. So
What I'm hearing is
that's what's not making it clear. We were told there was going to be 200,000 going into reserves for 2020, and that according to this document is not showing up. So it makes it really hard to look at the budget 2021 numbers.
so through the mayor,
she's right.
So not all of the monies have been transferred yet, only some of the money. So all of the stabilization has been transferred to reserves. But at the end of the year, once the year is done, the rest of the amount that is a surplus to the utility will go into reserves.
So are these actual 2020 what's only happened up till this point in this year, or is that a projected actual 2020 to December 31st?
This is projected.
This is a projected. So we're no longer projecting a $200,000 to go into reserves this year. We're only projecting $63,799 to go into reserves.
What are we sitting at? We are looking, maybe about 64,000, and part of that could be just the difference in volumes.
So we set the rates in the beginning of the year thinking that we're going to get 200,000, but because people have used less water, it's $140,000 less than we expected.
Well, so through the mayor, we still have one more billing cycle left, so we could see some changes through to the end of the year. But we have to look at consumption, as that's the only variable that we have, and we have to use. So the model uses 169. We're coming in at about 165. It looks like to the end of the year. And that's the big variable when you're using the prior year as your rate. So you could have a bigger than normal surplus, you could have a less than normal surplus. It all depends what the consumptive trending looks like for the end of the year.
So the 160, sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
Finish off. Yeah.
No, the 169 that we were projecting, and it's actually 165,000 cubic meters, that 4,000 difference made up 100 $40,000 in lost revenue?
So not necessarily, because it's also based on, not only is it based on, I think the number we used for cubes was what, 164 maybe, 165 for the previous model, as well as it looks at the original buckets that the billing was going to be in. So rate 1 was at 59%, and then rate 2 was, I believe, at 35%, and then rate 3. So that also impacts what the overall revenue is how the tiers are designed and how the volumes are between the 3 different tiers. So the consumptive rate, this is our first year using this model. We make some assumptions on where the consumption is going to be and what tier they're going to fit into. That's always going to be something that's going to be changing yearly. We have no way of really determining. We'll have at least this year, we'll know where residents lie as far as what buckets they're in on a go-forward basis. But in the original year, the first year of this bylaw, that's kind of where the tiers were at. So 59, 35, and then 5 or 6%, I think, was the last one. So that's how the bylaw was designed. But it looks like there's more people in the lower end conserving water, so that can bring your revenue numbers. That'll bring the revenue numbers down.
Okay. So yeah, just to finalize, I think we need to come back with these numbers, especially that financial impact option 1, option 2, budget consolidated, and figure out how this 200,000 works for us to feel better, because we don't even show it in the budget column. The $200,000 surplus that was supposed to be moved. It wasn't, like, it's just all confusing. So I'd be happy, as Councillor Waring said, to bring this back.
Okay. Councillor Hamilton and Mr. Sharp, did you want to comment first?
Just 2 things. Number 1, the bottom line, bad choice of words. At the end of the year, the amount that's transferred to reserves is the net surplus in the utility. It's the net surplus in the utility that's transferred to reserves. Mm-hmm. It's not an expense line that we build in. So what Crean's saying is, and I'm sorry to put words in your mouth, but what Crean's saying is we're using previous full year's actuals as a predictor for what might happen the year into the future. So once we've set that, if we have additional costs, for example, unusual contracted services because we had a month of a deep freeze, or truck requisition comes in differently, or all those sorts of things. Those are actual expenses that we didn't anticipate because we were using the previous full year's actuals. And so when we said we were going to have 200,000, we may or may not. We do our best to project what that might look like, but again, we don't have the crystal ball. So in fairness to Crean and the people that went before us to set the rate last year, it was based on what we thought we knew. And that's one of the reasons we have the utility stabilization rate, is to take some of those hits and those spikes out, and that will smooth that and ensure that if there were unexpected expenses after we set the rate, that the amount that goes into reserves gets topped up. That's one of the things we can use to top that up.
I'm just thinking, I don't think I'm going to be comfortable with any of this until I know what 2020 is. We did an extensive utility rate review. We changed our fixed rate in January 2020. We're now saying that the 200,000 that we thought was going to be in reserves looks a little bit more like 60-ish. I want to see what 2020 actually shakes out to before we talk about changing the consumptive rates, especially by changing them by 50%. Like, I can't wrap my head around this. I have 1,000,001 questions, and I don't think that they're going to be answered until we see how 2020 shakes out.
So through the mayor, it's not going to change the rate for 2021 because the rate is based on 2019 costs. So unless somewhere along the way you want to make some changes, that the bylaw specifically states you have to use the actual rates from the previous year to set the next year. So it's not going to change The calculation. The calculation is what the calculation is per the methodology set out in the bylaw.
Okay,
And
I'm
as
gonna
far
go-
as the consumptive rates, there is some variability, no question. It's based on consumption. It could be based on whether you have a dry summer or a wet summer, depending on whether people water. There's a whole bunch of variables on the consumptive side that you have to estimate. So we are using 2019 consumptive rates for our formula, and we are basing the next year's budget for those numbers. We're using what we think is going to end up being the 2020 actuals for the revenue numbers. That's the only good information that we have available, and we think it's very solid. It's very solid information.
There you go, Councillor Waring.
So it begs the question actually is if you're using the previous year for the next year, the previous year for next year is this year, not last year. And that's where I got confused when I was running through this thing, because we do this in Shrub and we do it in West End. We use the previous year. So we take 2020's numbers and we use them for 2021's budget. I don't understand if there is an immediate rush to agree numbers for 2021 in the last quarter of 2020, when the first billing is going to be in March, I think it is, next year. And I would think if we did this in January, we'd know all 2020's actual numbers, and we might feel a whole lot better about putting extra money into water and sewer than we do at the moment.
Yeah, so I have just raised another question. The $400,000 surplus in 2021, I just want to understand. So I guess we're setting our 2021 rate with the assumption that we will be putting the full $400,000 in. So I guess what I'm struggling with here then is that our budget for 2020, and regardless of whether we hit it or not, was set with the idea of $200,000 going into reserves. Essentially, that's what we set it at. So now we're assuming an incremental $200,000 going into reserves. The question I have is, where does that $200,000 come from? Because I talked about that trade-off equation where if we need an extra $300,000 on the utility side of things and we put it there, I'm fine with it if we, as long as the taxes go down by that amount. But in my mind, it sounds like we're talking, now the more I think about this, it sounds like we're talking about an incremental $200,000 going to reserves, which means that doesn't
make up for what we didn't get this year. Is that what you mean?
No, I just, if our plan is to make ourselves whole in 2021, I just don't know where that extra money is going to come from, right? Because now we can't reduce taxes by that amount, right? So, yeah, I guess I have a question around that too. And I guess that there's a methodology to this all. It's really hard for me to see it and understand it right now.
We're going to bring her back.
Yeah.
Cindy, you want to close off?
Yeah, it really comes down to understanding that 200,000 for me, because it looks like it wasn't even in the budget, so that we didn't put anything away this year. And going back to our operating budget package, if it's not a line item that there was supposed to be a surplus there isn't one in our operating budget package. So I think we had an error somewhere.
Sorry, Councillor Waring. Yeah.
I don't understand if we're going to put money into transfers or we can't have a line item. Because if we know the costs and we know we think we know the costs, we don't know exactly, but we've got to be pretty damn close. And if we put the 200,000 and then work backwards onto the rates, that should be what we're. It seems like we're taking rates and increasing them and coming out with a number that we don't understand where it came from or whether we even needed it. So what I would try to look at is, what do we have to pay West End? What do we have to pay Shrug? What do we have to pay for the maintenance and upkeep of the distribution system? And that's a cost which we should know from our records of maintenance, etc. And then for that we have to add the 200,000 or whatever the number is we deem to be acceptable for the particular year, and work that back into the register.
So to Councillor Waring, you're exactly right, Councillor Waring. That's what you see under budget option 1, 2021. The only difference is we don't have a transfer to reserve line under the expense. But we could add that in if you want, and add 400,000 or whatever the target number is, and make that an expense built into the utility. But if you forget about what 2020 is doing and look at the full cost of the utility in 2021, which we're basing on 2019 numbers as per the model, the number that spits out of the equation is the consumptive rate that Ms. Middleton has shared with you. So
$30 extra.
Budget 2021 option 1 is the formula, is the breakdown of all the costs below the line and what we would need to do above the line to recover our consumptive rates or recover the cost of the operation and put the money into reserves.
The full amount of money, just to clarify,
We're saying 407.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back. I believe the amount that was to go into reserves was 450, based on the model that MP had projected to get us an adequate amount in reserves to start to recapitalize our deep utility infrastructure long term. The rate that Ms. Middleton's proposing is going to get you 407, all things being equal, and assuming there's no wrinkles in the operation over the course of the year. So it would add or subtract from that.
So we could say we only want 200,000.
Yes.
And adjust accordingly.
Yes. Now, we don't recommend that because we want to start putting the right amount of money away. But if the rate is giving you some heartache, reduce the amount that goes into reserves. You can at least say you've brought all your expenses over into the utility now.
But if we put 200 into water and we put 200 into sewer, that's 400. And that's 300 more than we ever did when we were on the previous council.
That's right. So that 407 represents the total amount we're putting into the utility reserve, whether it's water, sewer, or storm.
This says financial impact consolidated.
That's all the utilities.
Okay. Okay. But I read this as water consolidated. I didn't read it as wastewater and everything else. But the 407 is based on water, wastewater, and the stormwater.
Correct.
And stormwater we do, Black Diamond does not, to Councillor Hamilton's point.
Yeah.
The point I would like to make is, here's the taxes that pays for the water, and here's our utilities. We want to take the exact same money that we're and pour it into here, take it out of here, put it over here. Very simple. Reduction in taxes, because you're paying it over here, you're not paying any more amount.
Yes.
Well, we are. We're paying $200,000 more.
We're paying more because we're going to beef up our actual reserves, which is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
For long-term
It's not
stability.
equal.
It's not equal, it's effective.
Slowly, we're getting there.
Well, we're getting there. So, that being said, I think there was still some questions to be answered for you, Ms. Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're going to bring this one back. So I'll get a motion to that effect. Councillor Hamilton gives me that. So we'll defer to next.
I would defer to 2021. I'd really like to see this year.
It's a good question. Is there a rush need to get this done before the end of this year? Could we look at this in January? Is there anything that is holding us off from doing that?
We need to approve the 2021 utility rates so we can build them into the operating budget.
Right. So next meeting.
But if it's a straight in and out, it doesn't impact the operating budget.
But it's not an in and out. There's $200,000
Currently, we're subsidizing the utility.
On it, and all the money earning from it is a wash.
You know, but there's $200,000 extra that has to come from somewhere. That's the thing that's come out of this discussion is we need another $200,000 somewhere, right?
And we also have to realize that for some of our residents, we're going to be increasing their bill by $100 a billing cycle. We need to be very aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so first meeting in December, we should have everything ironed out.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Or next meeting.
Mayor Crane,
Up to you.
we have a few small questions to bring answers back on, but I'm not quite sure what more council needs to see from us. We've brought you the numbers. We've brought you the rate we think we need to get everything over to the utility side and put the right amount away for utilities. We've shown that there's a corresponding decrease on the tax side for savings. And I'm not sure what more council needs to see. And I don't mean to minimize that. I just want to know what we can bring back for you.
Well,
Do you want me to make a list right now? Is that what?
Well, I'd love to be able to come back to council at a later date with the answers you're looking for.
yeah, and I think Councillor Hamilton's gonna.
I can email Corinne and yourself with my concerns, and if council wants to follow up with that. But so much of this doesn't make sense because in 2020, I believed that there was $200,000 in reserves. There's not. So there's question number one. Where did that $200,000 that I thought that was in reserves go? Question number two is, if there's an increase in expenses, $30,000 year over year, approximately, plus or minus, why are we looking for an additional $363,000 in revenue? I'd like confirmation that we're not duplicating our efforts on reserves with the stabilization fund versus the $363,000 that we're looking for in a transfer to reserves based on the financial impact option number one. I'd also like administration to look at what our neighbors are doing. I think it's very important to make sure that Turner Valley residents are on the same page as Black Diamond residents when it comes to utilities. The way that I understand it, doing some quick math, is that we are going to have $1.33 per cube difference over our neighbors. That is substantial. They're supposedly on a total cost recovery system as well. So if we're $1.33 more, I'd like to understand why. I get that we've got stormwater included in ours, so that's going to account for some of it, but $1.33 is substantial. Their fixed rate is also higher than Turner Valley's by, I think, $15 a month per household. So that probably evens out the stormwater.
Yep.
So why are our bills so much higher than our neighbors? So that's another question.
That's five. So, I mean, I think that's enough that
I would like
we can go
to
ahead
get
and
confirmation on the usage in Turner Valley. So we've got some data that says that we have 59% of residents in Tier 1. We've got some data that says we have 75% of residents of Tier 1. I'd love to know the actuals for 2020 so we know what our impact is going to be to our residents if we do a 50% increase on the consumption rate. And I also want to ensure that we are aiming, or we're going for full cost recovery, not full cost recovery plus, $363,000 plus $33,000 plus $200,000 that I thought was already in there. So I'm confused. Maybe it's the way that the information is laid out. Maybe I just need some time with administration to sit down and look through it and I'll magically understand. But the way that this is laid out to me, and if I can't understand it, I don't know how I'm going to get a resident to understand it. And regardless of the fact, I do not think I will agree with the full do it in one foul swoop. We just got information back from our residents on a survey saying that the vast majority of our residents have been impacted financially by COVID-19. And we want to increase their consumption rates by 50%.
And decrease increase their taxes by the equivalent amount.
The equivalent amount less 200,000
Yeah, well, that's,
plus 363,000.
this is the problem, is I can justify to a resident, your utility rates are gonna go up by $180 a year. The average tax bill is gonna go down by $180 per year. That is
If
justifiable.
we use 20.
What we've been told today is that that's not the case. So
Wouldn't be
the biggest thing that I need to see out of this is what is the full budget implication of this? What is that last budget that we saw? What does that look like if option one were adopted? Because what I'm hearing tells me that there's $200,000 somewhere that is incremental revenue. And I need to see how that shakes out. So, because like I said, if I had to tell somebody that their utility rate's going to go up by $180 and their tax bill is going to go down by $180, I can get my head around that. But if it's your utility rate's going up $180, and you're not getting any break on your taxes, that's a no-go.
That's more than a pizza, as Waring would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so some great questions for a follow-up. We'll bring it back next meeting, because I think we can get all those hammered out in the next 2 weeks. And to Wilkie's point, we want to see that, what is the tax implication if there's the 200 or the 250 or the 4. So we want to see that on a nice simple scale.
Yeah, I just, to clarify that, because this is the critical thing to me, what I'd like to see is that last budget that we ran, and the only incremental change being the implementation of option number 1 here, so that I can see what the difference is side by side. Because that will, to me, tell me, is there more dollars coming from residents or not? So that's what it boils down to, so.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't hear a lot of discussion on option 2. I think the only one who actually mentioned it was Councillor Hamilton. So we won't go beat up that right now. Just open the whole so I think we've got enough information extra that we'd like to see before making this decision. So Councillor Hamilton's made the request to defer pending more information to the November 16th meeting.
Our next meeting.
16th. Yeah. Okay, so any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor of that motion? Excellent, thanks guys. Thank you. All right. That was a good discussion, thank you. 14, new business, community support application, Diamond Valley Citizens on Patrol. Let's see here. I'll give you a motion to support that for $500. Yes? Yep. I'll make that motion that we support the Diamond Valley Citizens on Patrol, the amount of $500. And as usual, anyone who wants to get involved and volunteer, it's a great organization. Of course, with COVID and people being financially impacted, unfortunately, crime does go up in these times of economic hardship. So having some watching eyes out there in the evening for our community is always a good thing. So all the best, and I hope them have some safe nights. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor? Excellent, thank you.
Sorry, just we lost Councillor Rab. I just want to make sure he's here.
I was wondering why you popped into his window.
He's there.
I muted his video. Oh, no, he's back again. There
Just need to get his vote, Mayor Crane, on that one.
Yep. Gary, was that a positive, a yay or a nay for you?
I was a little slow in the uptake, so I guess the motion's already been moved, but my question would be, they got a $6,000 surplus or revenue, and they're only $1,300 expenses. So, I mean, it's done deal. So, because they get $5,000 from casino and $5,000 from donations, and $500 that is, and $500 from. So that's $6,000 plus they got a bank account, but their expenses are only $1,300. So they must have plans for other expenses. So I'm good.
Yeah, you bet.
That's a great organization.
Yeah, it's their casino 50/50 was only 500. So not 5,000. That's all good. Good organization. You're a yes, I assume? All right, good stuff. All right, thank you. Next we have 14.2 tax recovery public auction. Interesting one. Mr. Sharp, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mayor Crane. Unfortunately, we have a property in town that's significantly in arrears despite the staff's efforts to reach the property owners. We have not received a payment to this address since 2016. We've sent numerous letters, had our contractor attempt to reach out and enter into some sort of repayment options to no avail. So unfortunately, in extreme circumstances, it's the town's prerogative to enter into some form of collection proceedings, and typically it's a tax sale or a property auction. But in order to proceed, we require 3 items from council. The first is to set a auction date. The second is to establish a reserve price. And the third is to approve the terms and conditions of the sale. So all 3 of those items are discussed and recommended in the RFD presented in front of council. We're looking for a decision from council to proceed in those 3 areas. At any time, once the tax sale date is set, if we're able to reach the resident and they come in and enter into payment arrangements for the outstanding amount, then the home will not go to auction and will continue until such time as either the account is paid in full or the property owner's default on the payment arrangements, at which time the property would then go back to tax sale. I'm happy to answer any questions of council.
Go ahead, Councillor Rob, you can lead her off, and then Deputy Mayor Wilkie.
Yeah, through the mayor to Mr. Sharp. Is there a house on that property? Is there anybody living in the house?
Yes, there is.
Okay, so they're just making no effort to make a payment. Is the owner living in the house, or is it a renter? Do you know?
Yeah, we believe so, yes. It's the owner.
Okay. I'll make the motion that we move it on this, and I don't have the RFD in front of me, so I'll have to get somebody else to read it.
Okay, 1 sec. Go.
Option 1.
Option 1 requires 2 motions.
Yeah. I'll read it out for you, Councillor Rapp here. Option 1 is that council agree to hold a public auction at the Town of Turner Valley Administration Office, Turner Valley, Alberta, on February 26, 2021, at 1 p.m. for the purpose of recovering property tax arrears on properties legally described as Plan 2229 EW, Block 3, Lot 25, W, 40 degrees, in the Town of Turner Valley. Second motion, or second portion of the option, is that council agreed to a reserve bid of $165,000 and approved the terms and conditions for the 2020 public auction.
2021.
2021. Sorry, back that up. That council agreed to the reserve bid of $165,000 and approves the terms and conditions for the 2021 public auction. Discussion, council. Deputy Mayor Wilkie.
First time going through one of these, just some questions on it. You said you believe it may be owner occupied. So outreach efforts to this point have gotten no response, but have been confined to written communications up until this point. Is that?
That's correct. In addition to phone call attempts and I've got the file here.
Yeah,
There's a thick file. Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure. Would approval of these options then, I assume, would trigger posting of a notice?
Yeah.
And there's no missing it at that point in time then?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, and then the third question was, you said, payment of the entire, arrears. That could include potentially a plan to repay over a period of time, up to 3 years, I guess is what it says.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hamilton?
I'm just wondering about the date. It says that there was notice provided to the property owner on April 19th, 2019 of the town's intent to offer the property at public auction if the tax arrears and penalty costs were not paid in full by March 31st, 2020. Why are we waiting until February for the tax sale if they received notice so long ago
Sure.
of the town's intent?
Yeah, that's a great point, Councillor Hamilton. The long and short of it is that COVID had hit and we were managing the pandemic, and we held off. We held off. Tax Service, our contractor, held off. We're in a position now where we're able to circle back and do that again. The reason for February is we need to allow, so now we've made the decision, we're coming to you in November. We need sufficient time as per the MGA to advertise accordingly and give proper notice. So that takes us until the February date that we're suggesting.
And then the amount that's outstanding, is that taxes only or is that utilities?
That's all charges moved over to the tax roll, so unpaid utilities, penalty charges, etc.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to speak on this one, we had one of these in our prior council term, and as soon as it went to this level, the homeowner came in, made an agreement, and started making payments. I hope that that's the case in this as well. Nobody wants to have to make this tough call, but 4 years of not paying any taxes, that's not really helping the cause. So hopefully this is a big enough of a warning sign to get them back at the table. And with that, if there's no other comments, I'm going to call the question. Cindy's good, Rab is good. No comments here in chambers. So, option one as presented by Councillor Rab, read by me. All in favor?
The first motion.
That's right, option one.
But there's two motions.
Two motions.
There's 2 points in the motion.
No. They have to be
She would like to have
two
two
distinct
votes
motions.
on distinct votes. So that, what we just voted on, for anyone at home, is that council agreed to holding a public auction at the Town of Turner Valley Administration Office, Turner Valley, Alberta, on February 26, 2021, at 1 p.m. for the purpose of recovering property tax arrears on property legal description as Plan 2229 EW Block 3, Lot 25, W40 in the Town of Turner Valley. Next motion is that council agree. Wilkie, you gonna get that? Yeah. Okay, sure.
Did you vote on the first one?
We did.
Yes. First one's Gary. You want to read her off?
Just the council agreed to a reserve bid of $165,000 and approve the terms and conditions for the 2021 public auction.
Excellent. All in favor? And that is carried. All right, thank you. Let us know how things roll out periodically on that one. General correspondence, 15.1, we have nothing. Correspondence action considered, we have none. Committee board correspondence submitted. Intermunicipal Economic Development Committee, Councillor Waring.
Guilty.
Guilty as charged. All right.
Is there any particular questions? I'm happy to field them. Otherwise, by reading this, you know as much as I do. We have now started working with Ian Ladd on Creative, on the marketing plan. At our next meeting, we're going to go through the draft of everything he's done. He seems to be a very good person, qualified, experienced, even though he's young. We're hoping it's going to work out very well for everybody.
Very good. Excellent. Give us a motion to adopt for information. Excellent. Any questions from council? Mr. Rab is good. All day is good. Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Excellent, thank you. Municipal Planning Commission, Councillors Hamilton, Holiday, and Deputy Mayor Wilkie. Any good news?
This meeting for these minutes was just looking for an extension on development for the property, the old tennis court land is what this was. So I think it was a 1-year extension.
Mm-hmm.
And a sign for the fabulous Mrs. Bates' daycare.
Oh,
yes.
Or preschool,
Yeah,
daycare, there you go. Excellent, and no problem with either?
No.
Excellent. All right. No further questions, all in favor? Hamilton. All right. Western Regional Sewage Commission, Councillors Hamilton, Waring, and Rabb.
There's only 2, don't forget.
Are alternate.
I'm not on that one. I'm an alternate.
That's right.
So you don't get mentioned. Sorry.
Okay, Waring gonna go, or Rabb, were you up? Okay, Rab's coming in.
Thank you. Just nothing major in that particular meeting. The only one that would be of significance is the one we've dealt with, the expression of interest for management and administration, and we've dealt with that. So other than that, it's business as usual.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Make a motion to accept it.
Perfect, thank you. All in favor? That's carried. Waring voted against, but that's okay. Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. And I am now replaced by Councillor Holiday. And Wilkie is our long-termer on there. Okay. Go ahead, Wilkie.
Yeah, this was, these meetings are minutes are somewhat dated from earlier in the summer. Mr. McGonigal resigned from the council, or from the committee, which we thank him for his service as well. But the practical projects, there was questions around, what would go on at this meeting. Obviously, this was in June, and then we have subsequently met. So don't have official minutes out of that yet, but obviously the group is still very supportive and very keen to get going on something at Arrowhead. There was a lot of question around what happens with the deferral from last year, right? Or is that a deferral or a cancellation? Looking for clarity on that, and the idea being that we did commit money last year. Is that money coming back this year? And I think, I told them that's a question that the council has to answer, I think, during the budget process. So we'll obviously get back to them on that. We directed a discussion around prioritization of the Friendship Trail paving that we talked about. So we did have that conversation, and minutes will come forward with sort of an official discussion on it. But the general perspective was the view that that is largely a maintenance activity, and Mr. Beaton had talked about reserving some funds for paving of that as well over the next several years. So that should be the hope of the committee, was at least that would be looked at as a separate initiative to some of the new initiatives that we had underway. I think the general consensus was, if we had to rank it against the other priorities, there's a lot more desire to proceed with some of the newer initiatives. I think just there's a lot of excitement around that Arrowhead, and there was a lot of good positive feedback from residents around that as well. So just I bring that feedback back. Official minutes will come out on that, but the view was that that paving, that hopefully that can be viewed as a separate exercise, and I can see the argument for it. That's something that usually it's kind of multi-year processes to reserve funds for a project along those lines. So anyway, I'll leave it at that, and unless there's any questions.
good. I think there's a lot of work in progress on that one.
Yeah, I'll give a motion to accept for information.
Excellent. All in favor? Excellent. And we are going to take a 5-minute break. So don't go anywhere, Holiday and Rab. We will come back after that 5-minute break, and then we will go into our in-camera session. So we'll just recess for 5, then we'll return, go in camera or a closed session, and carry on from there. If everyone could mute while we are